Hello, sisters, and welcome to Go Solo Live. This is Jennifer Buchholz with Transform Via Travel. It's time to sit back, grab a cup of coffee, and listen to my conversation with Chantell Glenville as she shares about how she created a plan to travel the world, and she is still doing it.
Welcome to Go Solo Live.
Don't you mean Go Solo Live? Have you ever been asked, why on earth would you travel alone? Go Solo Live not only answers that question, but celebrates life as a midlife solo traveler. This is a safe place for women to come together to reminisce about their travels, encourage others to travel, and to dig into the real lessons learned from these journeys. Now join Jennifer Buchholz with Transform Via Travel as she and her guests share stories of the solo travelers of midlife women.
Today, I'd like to welcome Chantell Glenville to share her stories with us. Welcome, Chantell.
Hi, thanks for having me.
So, in the research that I've done, I found that you quit your job to travel in 2014. And that's like a pretty major step.
Yes, indeed.
So, can you give us a little bit about your personal background, and then we'll get into maybe what was going on in your life when you decided to make that change?
Yeah, of course. I used to work in marketing and advertising, and I went straight into marketing and advertising out of university. I took a year off and traveled a bit in between then, but then went straight into marketing and advertising. And it's quite a high-pressured environment. And unfortunately, I found myself at the age of 27 on the verge of a nervous breakdown. I was working 70-plus hour weeks and would cry in the office at least once a week, usually on a Tuesday. I have no idea why Tuesday was my day, but it was,
Wow.
Which was what was going on in my life before I ended up traveling. Actually, that's kind of what started it.
So was there a certain tipping point, breaking point? Because I can imagine, if you recognize the pattern of Tuesdays are typically my bad day in the office, that's a sign.
Yeah, no, there was definitely a tipping point. I'd been stressed from work before, as it's quite typical of my industry, but this time was by far the worst, and it completely destroyed my personality. I lost all my self-confidence. I'd get nervous when someone just asked how I was. And there was just this moment where I realized that nothing could be worth what I was doing to myself at that moment in time by carrying it on. Nothing was worth it. No amount of money, no amount of career progression, anything. And I decided then and there that I was going to travel. I needed a big change. I needed to go and actually remember what I was like as a person again. So unfortunately, I couldn't travel right at that moment because, money's required, things like that. So I had to take some time to go and get everything in order, but I made the decision then. And then I spent the next 9 months with everything I did in that time working towards enabling me to go travel long term and actually take the break I needed to get myself back to me.
Okay. So first of all, you came up with the plan. And
Yes.
The plan was the travel. Then you made sure that you were actually prepared. So you just started to work the plan. But, okay, I love those, just because we realize that this is our passion and this is what we need to go do, it doesn't mean we just pack up and go the next day.
Yeah, absolutely. No, there's things you've got to get in place to do so.
Well, I think that that's actually one of the myths about what people believe about the people who do what you've done, is that you just hit your breaking point and you scooted. You were just gone. I'm like, no. I've never heard that story from anybody. It's not that they're actually running away. It's that they're seeking something different.
Yes, absolutely. And that was it. It wasn't running away from anything. It was giving myself the time to actually spend time with myself and work out what I enjoyed doing in my day, maybe try and regain my personality, get used to talking to people again, actually getting my life back and focusing on my enjoyment of my life for once.
Well, and so that's what I love, because one of the points that I love to share with people is how travel can allow you to rediscover yourself.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you're saying that you're reclaiming yourself. You're learning how to reconnect with yourself again and creating an opportunity for you to maybe do things that you weren't able to do because it just wasn't what was acceptable anymore.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely.
So where'd you go? Where'd you start? Or do you want to start about what the preparations were really like?
Yeah, I mean, the preparations weren't so bad because as much as it wasn't, I made the decision and went, I had made a very firm decision at that point that I was going to travel. That's what was going to happen. So everything I did after that was just focused around that. I knew what my end goal was. So I started saving up money. I got out of my lease on my property. I got all my vaccinations, my visas, everything like that. Then I started my trip in the north of India. And since then, I've been to 10 countries in this trip. It's 2.5 years in now. I was supposed to go away for 1.5 years was what I thought maybe might be the case.
Okay.
And I was supposed to go to Asia for about half of that and South and Central America for about half of that. And I've been in Asia for the whole 2.5 years so far.
So what made you, how did you come up with what your itinerary was, where you were going, and the why behind some of those places?
It was slightly random because I didn't really mind where I was going. I just wanted to go explore some places and spend some time on my own and meet some new people. So I looked at a map. I looked at lots of websites which sell round the world tickets. I didn't buy a round the world ticket, but I looked at a lot of the routes that websites do for round the world tickets and then would look at those maps to see what was like logical journeys to take.
Sure.
And then looked at which countries I looked at and went, that appeals to me. Okay, I'll add that one to the list. Yeah, I like the look of that one. I'll add that one to the list. And then plotted my own route from there, which I've completely thrown out the window and not paid attention to whatsoever.
But you needed a plan to get started, or you wouldn't have even really gotten started.
Yeah.
But I love that.
You need somewhere to fly into.
You do. You need somewhere to fly into, and the first place you're going to stay, and then from there. But you looked at all these existing resources for inspiration. So you weren't out there trying to recreate it on your own. You just dug into everything else that's already, created and inspired, and then you customize that to fit what you were seeking.
Yes. I wanted to do the trip on my own and plan my own route and do my own thing. But at the same time, I don't know what's in every country because I haven't been there. So looking at every other resources to figure out what might appeal to me in terms of things to see and where to go is really useful before traveling.
Absolutely.
I actually now, as a result of that, on my website, I plot out the entire routes I've done around countries so that other people don't have to spend quite as much time looking through other websites as I did. Just to, try and make people's lives simpler.
Well, and it's huge because that can be really overwhelming for some people. And for some people, I see that actually prohibits them from either traveling completely solo or from even starting. Like that can be a lot of overwhelm.
It's a lot of information to go through, and it takes a lot of time and planning, and it's not really the most fun activity. And there's just so many logistics if you're doing a trip where you're moving, that it's not just working out where you want to go, it's then how you're going to get from that place to that place. Is there enough time? All of that it definitely can be overwhelming, but it shouldn't stop anyone traveling. It's worth it. Even if you do all the research yourself, it's worth it.
It's definitely worth it. So let's talk about how much travel had you done before you embarked on this big trip?
I'd done a reasonable amount of travel. I think I first took my first solo trip when I was 22. Oh, no, younger actually. When I was about 19, I went to Spain to learn Spanish in the holiday from university, college for you guys, for 2 months to learn Spanish there.
Nice.
And then the year after that, I went back again. And then the year after that, I finished my degree and I saved up money working for 4 months. And then I went to France for 2 months to learn French, which turned into 4 months. And then I went to Costa Rica for a month after that. That's kind of around that age is when I started doing solo travels. But I eased myself into it a bit because all of those, I was going somewhere to do a specific activity. So it never felt as big a deal because I was going to go learn Spanish or French. And so there would be other people around. I'd be in classrooms with people. There was a language school. I could ask for help. It's not like a tour or anything, but it's more organized, So I guess I eased myself in bit by bit so that then the first time I did take a solo trip further abroad, I wasn't so worried about it.
And again, that's an example of, whatever somebody's version of baby steps are, start there and then build on them and grow.
Absolutely. And I talk about that a lot to people, which is figure out how you like doing things. Are you the type of person that likes to ease yourself into things, or just jump in the deep end, work that out, and then work out, if it's your first trip, what would be most fitting to your personality and how you enjoy doing stuff?
Absolutely. That's beautiful. So did your family do a lot of travel when you were growing up?
No, not really. My family, we went on holidays from about the age of 10 onwards. We went on family holidays, but we would go on a family holiday to somewhere in Europe for a week where it's a resort. So really, if you woke up on the beach, you could be anywhere in the world. You don't actually see the location you're in. Everyone speaks your language, that sort of thing. So we went on holiday, but we didn't actually really travel or experience other cultures so much.
Understood. And your family is like many others in that. It's just about getting away. It's not necessarily about doing new.
Yeah, and I completely understand that, because when you're working all the time, and especially if you've got children to bring up, you just want a week off to actually just sit and relax at some point. 100% get that.
Absolutely.
I, however, would prefer to explore different places. I even would do that when I was working, take some time off to go and do a little mini travel around somewhere for like a week or so, but go to a few different places rather than staying still. Because that makes me feel alive. I'm more interested in that.
Absolutely. Well, and again, knowing what's going to make you feel alive and doing that makes a huge difference.
Yeah.
So what are your favorite things to do when you're traveling?
It varies. I mix things up between traveling quickly and traveling slowly, because it's great to go and see lots of different things in different locations in different countries. But if you're constantly moving after a while, it can get quite tiring. So I rushed at the start of this trip. I started in the north of India and I went down to Sri Lanka and into Myanmar, and the whole of that bit, that was the first 2.5 months of my travels, it was already pre-planned out before I left England, because I was still kind of a bit stressed and holding the stress inside me. So it was like, I must do stuff quickly. I must go see everything. So I rushed around all of it, which ruined the experience somewhat, because it meant if I got to a location and really liked it, I couldn't stay longer. If I met people I wanted to travel with for a bit, I couldn't change my plans because everything was plotted out.
Right.
And it took about 2.5 months for me to twig that, and then down the planning, and then down how fast I was traveling around, so that actually I could just take time to explore places slowly. And so one of my favorite things to do now is, when arriving in a new location, instead of getting in a taxi or a tuk-tuk or whatever and going to lots of different sites, is just to walk the city. I just put my headphones in before even meeting anyone, anywhere, talking to anyone. I just go and walk around and go and explore and see what I can find and what I see. And it's so nice, and I love it because it gives you a sense of what a place is actually like, and actually allows you to work out where you are in the city and what's going on. Whereas if you arrive and immediately jump on different transport, you don't actually really ever get your bearings and feel like you know a place.
Absolutely.
Up there for me, absolutely. And in a lot of cities, you can get free walking tours to do that as well. But I just like running off and doing it myself quite a lot.
Yeah, I like doing the free walking tours. I think that they're great in terms of getting the lay of the land, as well as getting a few, bits and tips, because I don't love doing a ton of research before I go.
Yeah, no, I don't either now. I usually now just arrive in a place, walk around, see what I find, ask a few people, ask other people in my accommodation or at the reception. It's a great way to start conversations with people as well if you're on your own, not having a clue, because then you have a reason to talk to people and go, hey, I just arrived. Do you know what I should see or what's great to do here? And it, helps you make friends.
Absolutely. That's awesome. So let's talk about the biggest learnings that you've had, especially early on. What were a couple of things that you, like the revelations, especially like the self-revelations about yourself while you're traveling?
Yeah, I think the biggest one, the most profound one that stuck with me is it's really made me realize that time is actually the most valuable thing we have. And it's made me realize that because perhaps for the first time in my adult life, traveling for a long time has allowed me the freedom to actually do whatever I want with the time that I have. And as adults, we don't usually get to do that because we're rushing from one thing to another thing. And we actually never get to sit still to think about what we actually want to be doing. And for me, that's the biggest one. And that's the biggest one in terms of how I approach anything now. Even if I was to do some freelance work for someone, I'm thinking, am I willing to trade off the fact that I could be doing something else with that time for this? What is more valuable to me? It's not about money. It's not about getting the money. It's now about time. That's the most important value. And then obviously money is needed to facilitate free time at points, but that's the trade-off now. And that's the one that I think will always stick with me the longest. It's also given me a lot more perspective on life in general.
Yes.
Because a lot of things can go wrong whilst you're traveling, from big things to small things. And what I realized is that they mostly don't matter. As long as you're alive and healthy and unharmed, none of the rest of it really matters. That at the core is the most important. As long as I'm good and hopefully have my passport. I would quite like to have my passport. But in general, as long as I'm good and I haven't been harmed in any way, anything else, it's not really that important. If someone stole all my luggage, all right, that's what I got travel insurance for. I'll go buy some new clothes. It's an excuse to go shopping. If my bus was delayed by 4 hours, okay, well, I haven't overplanned my trip, so I just got there at a later time and I got to read my book for longer. Like, none of it actually is that important at the end of the day and worth getting worked up about. The only things that really matter are your safety and well-being.
Agreed with that completely. But did that actually happen to you? Did your luggage get stolen?
No, I've had it lost, though. On the way to Philippines, AirAsia decided to lose it for 2 days, at which point I realized that, one, I didn't care, which was a beautiful realization because nothing was that important to me in my bag that it mattered. And two, I got a free excuse to go shopping, which I hadn't done in like 6 months because I was traveling on a budget. And I have travel insurance. So I was like, well, someone else is going to pay for this. Wonderful. Okay.
That's awesome. My bags were misplaced by Air New Zealand for a couple of days as I arrived there. And it was no big deal because I had built in a little bit of room in the front of the trip. So I didn't need it to go somewhere immediately. But by day 3, I was ready to go to wherever I'm going next. I'm like, I need some luggage, but I did not go shopping. I just really suffered through whatever stuff I had and made it work.
Oh, I had to, because I'd arrived in Manila at 3 a.m. And because I was getting in at 3 a.m. on my own, I was wearing long trousers and a long sleeve shirt because I was going to get a taxi, I don't know, to my hostel.
Yes.
So I like to arrive as covered up as possible in those situations. And I had no other clothes in my hand luggage bag. So I then and it's boiling, absolutely boiling. And I was in a fan dorm room. It was the most uncomfortable night's sleep. And I walked out the hostel the next morning and the heat hit me. And I was like, right, I've got to find some shorts. I don't care what they look like. I just need some shorts. This is not
I don't
happening.
blame you. That sounds wonderful. My gosh.
So I kind of had to, but I had a similar thing with that. I was supposed to leave a couple of days later as well, to go to another island. So I had to wait out. I hadn't booked my flight. I had to wait it out a bit longer. But that's also why I would recommend not over planning trips if you can avoid it, because stuff happens that you can't control. So
that's exactly
so
it.
Just to have a bit of flexibility there.
Right. And again, some of the fun happens in the moments where you're like, well, what do I do? How do I manage this? And then you figure it out.
Yes, exactly. Makes you very good at problem solving.
Well, and I've recently, as people in some ways, wonder about the lifestyle that I have when I am traveling, recently it came up and I'm just like, I've never gone on a trip without packing for it. Like I'm pretty prepared when I need to be, but I don't always need to be. And I'm okay with that too. Yeah. So
it's good to have a balance.
It is good to have a balance. And it's important to have perspective, just because we think we need something at home because that's what we're used to. It doesn't mean that when we're traveling, we have those same needs. And I love reminding people of that.
Yeah, I mean, mostly what you actually need is access to accommodation and food, really. Like generally your like base level needs. You're probably already wearing clothing, so you're good on that front. Other than that, like you need a roof over your head and some food. Everything else is kind of, it's not a necessity.
It's not. That's exactly it. And again, those are fun/interesting lessons to learn as we go. So tell me about some of the joyous things that, you know, have really made your heart sing when you're traveling.
Oh gosh. I mean, it's been quite a long trip, so there's been a lot. I think one of my favorite moments was last year. I went to Malaysia and traveled around for a month. And I'd been in Indonesia for quite a long time beforehand, so I'd learned quite a bit of Indonesian language. And Malaysian and Indonesian are quite similar in terms of the language. So I went over to Malaysian Borneo, and they don't get a lot of foreigners there. And I just went to the beach one day, and there was this group of about 15, 18-year-old girls, and they started giggling and talking amongst themselves. And then one of them finally got up the courage to come over and say hello to me. So I said hi, we started talking, and so I replied to her in Indonesian because it's close enough that someone speaking Malay will understand. And she was like, oh my God, you speak Malaysian? And I'm like, well, no, Indonesian. She's like, it's close enough, keep talking, keep talking.
Oh, wow.
Because it's so rare for them to see a foreigner there who can speak a close enough language that they understand, that they all then swarmed around. They were so overexcited. And I stood and I had this 15-minute chat with them. Then we took a load of group photos. And it was just beautiful. And they were so interested in my life and what had brought me there as well. So it opens up a whole world to them that they also maybe never had that conversation with someone before.
Absolutely.
And it really brought home the importance of learning languages to me as well, because I couldn't have had that interaction, or it wouldn't have been the same interaction had I not learned close enough language to have that conversation. And it was just such a lovely, warm moment.
How did you go about learning the language?
For Indonesian, I did a few weeks of language school, but language school is quite expensive. I've been traveling for a long time without working. So rather than just staying in language school, I did a budget version where I'd go for 1 week, I'd get the books, go home, and I'd try and learn everything I could so that I had gone up a level by the time I went back. Then I would go back again for a week, get new books, go back, learn all the books myself. So I did about 3 weeks of language school, and then the rest I just learned talking to people on my own at home.
That's awesome. So you're very committed to the process, which is wonderful.
Yeah, I love learning other languages. It's incredible when you're thinking in them and dreaming in them. It's just I still find it such a bizarre experience. And it does change your experience of a place, how people interact with you, how friendly they are to you, what you learn about a culture. Even the way people phrase things in different languages tells you information about that culture. There'll be words and sentences that don't exist in English.
Fascinating. That language gap can be both, a blessing, and then it can be, because there's also these wonderful things that happen when you don't speak the language, and it can be challenging, right? But there's also some really neat things that can happen there. So again, when we talk about like getting people ready to go travel, learning the language is amazing. If you have the time, the inclination, the gift of learning language, go do it. But if you're not going to, learn the basics that you're going to need to get by for your health, your safety, comfort, and any food issues and things like that. And then be okay that you're going to have to come up with some other ways.
Yes. And I mean, I've shown up to other places not knowing the basics, bad on my part, where I've just learned hello and thank you, and haven't prepped for food issues. I'm a vegetarian. That one can come up in some countries, difficult when you don't speak the language.
Absolutely. And they may not know how to honor that in some ways as well.
No, I mean, I found myself in Myanmar the first day I got there, walking around, and it got to 3:00. I was like, oh, I'm starving. I should get some food. So I started looking around, and there's nowhere that has any menus in English. Everything's just like, little street cafes. And I went up, no one's speaking English. I mean, that's It's my bad. I'm the one who doesn't speak their language.
Right.
But anyway, so I'm like, I really need some food. And so I carried on walking around, and then I saw this one guy eating a bowl of noodles that looked vegetarian at this restaurant. So I just went over, pointed to the bowl of noodles and was like, that? And he was like, okay.
Right.
So he just, sign language. I just pointed to what the other person was having. Like, please, can I have that? He made me that. I got some food. Wasn't the most varied or tasty meal in the world, but I got to eat. So, that works for me.
Exactly. I did the same thing the last time I was in Bogota. I was looking for breakfast. The gentlemen that were dining outside, I'm like, that looks good. And let's try that. You never know. You never know what you're going to get. And I think that's some of the fun.
Yeah, exactly. You might discover something new that you really like.
Yes, absolutely. Okay, so we were talking though about those like revelation moments. Let's talk about like personal insights that you've gotten throughout this journey.
I don't know how much it's been personal insights because it's changed me somewhat. Well, it's changed me in the extent that it's allowed me to go back to my old self. So as I mentioned before, the stress I was under destroyed my self-confidence and would make me nervous just talking to people, which is not at all how I used to be. It's completely contrary to my previous personality. And so it's not so much that I've been given insights, but I've been allowed to revert back to the person that I actually was, because now I'll talk to anyone and everyone. I see everyone I meet as a potential friend. Whereas, that's very different to how I was at the end of working when I was so stressed out that I couldn't even talk to someone. So it's allowed me to come back to myself to a certain extent rather than discover things. And it's changed me in ways. It's made me more patient and flexible, just due to the nature of long-term travel that kind of you have to be, because a lack of patience when traveling would really lead to having a very horrible time. So it's given me, I guess, aspects of my personality that I quite like now and appreciate that weren't there before as well.
Absolutely. Okay. So again, it's through those experiences, things continue to evolve and emerge.
Yeah.
So are you running into a lot of other solo travelers while you're out there?
Yes, very much so. You meet solo travelers everywhere you go, and especially if you stay in hostels. Not everyone's preference, but it's easiest for meeting people, and you can also still book solo, like separate rooms in hostels anyway, if you don't want to share a room. Much easier to meet people then, and so many people are in the same boat that everyone's so friendly and warm and open. It's not like it would be normally in a big city where if you talk to a random stranger, they're going to wonder what's wrong with you and why you're interacting with them. Instead, everyone, at least in a hostel environment, is going into it kind of with the approach towards interacting with others. So I've met people through hostels, through co-working spaces, through just walking out on the street and chatting to people, through places I've gone for food. If a restaurant's busy and I get there and someone's on a table on their own, I'll ask to share and then I'll have a chat and make a new friend. I have no shame about that now. I go straight in. I'm like, hey, where are you from?
Absolutely. Well, and there shouldn't be. It's funny. Even I love dining in various restaurants overseas because it's so common to just sit down with strangers.
Yeah. And I love that. It's great. You never, you don't know what conversation you're going to have over dinner or who you're going to discover.
Exactly. And, it's more like if there's room, then there's room. And we just join. Where in the U.S., that is just, it seems like such an intrusion on space. Even like in a coffee shop where somebody's at a table for 4 and they're alone. It's like,
yeah,
can I share? And then it seems like a big scary thing.
Can I share? And then we won't interact with each other.
For sure. Sure. Yeah, for sure we won't interact. It's unfortunate.
It's exactly the same back in London as well.
Oh.
Yeah. Don't talk to strangers in London.
Don't talk to strangers. That's the funniest thing is that we keep telling people don't talk to strangers, and then that's what we go out and do because
I love talking to strangers.
I know. And in some ways, like the stranger, the better.
Yes.
Right?
Indeed.
Cool. Okay. So you've been on this journey a year longer than you anticipated.
Yes.
How did that happen? Like, how did you decide like what extension looks like and what's coming next?
Well, I didn't really decide. I just kind of never ended the trip. I originally had a flight for about 8 or 9 months into my trip to Australia, and I cancelled that. I cancelled that around about, so I've written 2 books whilst I've been away, and I cancelled that round about the time I decided I wanted to write the first of the books, because I realized I wanted to stop still in one location for a bit and just write. So I stopped still in one location for a bit and I just wrote. And then once I'd done that, I moved on to the second book. So then I stopped still for a bit longer and then started moving around again. But it just kind of, it naturally happened. And the reason I didn't buy a round the world ticket or actually have a flight book time is because I didn't want to be forced to return home at a set point just because I'd already paid a certain amount of money to do so. You know, the return flight home is probably going to be the most expensive out of everything, because everything else is just smaller flights between countries. So I didn't want to have that as a mental, well, then I'll lose X amount of money. Right. As it would trap me in and actually reduce some of the freedom that I've given myself in deciding to do this. I've kept money aside for that flight, obviously, so that if I ever needed to return home quickly, I would be able to do so. Yep. But until that point, if I can keep traveling and I'm enjoying it still, then I would like to do so.
That's fantastic. So what's coming next?
I'm not sure, actually, at this moment. I'm thinking about doing a couple of little trips around. There's a few places I haven't seen in Asia that I would quite like to see still. I haven't been to China or Japan yet. I'd quite like to go to them.
Okay.
And then at some point next year, it's on my radar to leave Asia at last and go to South and Central America, finally. But we'll see if that happens. I've been telling myself that for a while.
What's been getting in your way?
Oh, nothing. I've just been really enjoying myself in Asia and exploring, staying still in places for a bit. Yeah, it's just, I didn't really like it. But that's fine. I mean, I will move on. Sure. And I've been to one country in South America before and one country in Central America. I really liked it there as well. So I know that there are some amazing things to see. And, you know, there are great things outside of Asia too. So I will get there. I just need to get around to it.
So when you think about, you know, how much longer, is this now your new lifestyle? There's no like real end date that you're anticipating?
Pretty much, yeah. This is now my new lifestyle.
That's amazing.
So that's why it doesn't always involve constant travel now. It involves what I feel like doing at the time. And so it's now become, I guess, less about necessarily moving constantly and more about just making sure I'm always focusing on designing my life how I want it to be, so that I get to do what I would like to do each day rather than what I feel I should do or what I need to do, actually focusing on my own happiness as the priority.
That sounds awesome. Right? It makes a lot of sense. So what does work look like for you now? Because you have the advertising background, you've wrote a book in both travel and advertising stuff.
Yes. So work is varied and different in a lot of ways. So obviously I've written 2 books and I have 3 blogs that I run that are related to those books as well, which takes up quite a lot of time. I sometimes do freelance marketing work too, but I try to keep that to a minimum because that is an exchange of my time for money. And I still have savings. I've been quite good at not spending too much money each month. Like I do travel on a budget. I could have lived a lot nicer maybe at times, but then I wouldn't have been able to travel and not work for as long. And for me, that's a worthwhile trade-off. And I also have some properties I rent out back in England as well that give me a bit of money each month to help support me.
Absolutely. So you, again, you know, the idea, people always talk when you want to live this type of lifestyle to have multiple income streams. So you do have a varied portfolio, and
that's really important to have multiple income streams because you never know when one of them might drop out for a bit, and you don't want that to cause a mass hysteria panic, you know? So I wouldn't be comfortable if I didn't have any savings to fall back on. I wouldn't be comfortable if it was just the properties being rented out that supported me because, Occasionally you have really bad tenants leave a house in a state and then it's empty for 2 months afterwards, you know. Things happen that suddenly one of those is knocked out and you're like, oh, okay, so what do I do now? So setting up multiple income streams if you want to be traveling long term and not having to stress each month how you're going to feed yourself is quite important. Yes.
What does your back home support look like for you?
So obviously I've got my family and friends back home, and most of my friends were really supportive. My family were great about it, probably mostly because my parents are basically ex-hippies. And so this actually might be the proudest my dad has ever been of me for quitting my job to go travel the world, because he's not up for doing things as society tells you to do them. So it's like, great, you decided to leave your job and actually just go explore and work out how to keep earning enough money to keep doing it as you go. So he's very happy about it. My mum worries, as mothers do. Even though I'm now 31 years old, she still worries about it quite a lot. I think that's normal. But they've been over to see me once since I've been away, and they came to Bali when they came over. And they saw, you know, one of the countries or areas I've been in, and it allowed them to see that I was fine.
Good.
You know, it wasn't scary and weird, and actually, you know, life's pretty normal and manageable, and I know what I'm doing and it's all okay. So that, I think, helped reassure her quite a bit.
That does. That's got to be reassuring.
Yeah.
So how do you stay connected with those that are still back at home? What are the methods that you use?
Skype mostly to talk to people, and Facebook chat as well. Facebook Messenger makes it easy just to message people quickly.
Okay.
The time differences don't really matter because you just write back when you're awake. And I've been back to England to visit a couple of times since I've been away for a couple of friends' weddings and things. But the people who matter, they'll still be around. And I think that's what travel is kind of, in a strange way, useful for as well. Because I read a lot of stories about people going home and them saying, you know, I've lost some of my friends. I think the ones you've lost just because you left the country for a bit weren't really your real friends. And what it tells you as well when you go home is, who do I want to see? Like, who do I really want to see? I've been away for ages. Who is it that I'm really excited to go see right now? They're the people who matter most to you. So there's no point really wasting time on people you're not that bothered about seeing after a year, you know? So it kind of helps actually solidify friendships in a way.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That sounds fantastic. And I agree that, you know, if people aren't ready to accept what you're choosing and to be supportive, then that's probably the end of that season for that relationship.
Yes, exactly.
Interesting. Okay, so let's make sure that people know. Let's start with talking about your book, because you have a book related to travel that I want people to be able to check out. And it hasn't even been out yet a year, so it's still a lot of current relevant information.
Yes, it's getting close to a year. Yeah, still under a year.
So where can they find it? And I'll have the links. I'll have the links in the show notes as well. Give a little bit of why you wrote it, what it's about.
Yep. So the book is called Travel for Your Life. And I wrote it to help encourage people to travel. So the main thing it focuses on, it's not a guidebook to different locations. It's about why you should travel and the benefits of travel, about actually making the decision you're going to do it, how to get everything in place so you can go then travel, what the benefits will be once you do so. And then it has practical information on what you might need to pack, what you might need to prepare in advance, staying safe on the road, especially as a solo traveler. But the main thing is about getting over those obstacles that cause people to keep putting it off. And I wrote it because I put off changing my life for too long. And it's so easy to think, all right, I'll do it in 5 years, I'll do it in 10 years, I'll do it in 15 years, or I can't because there's this, there's that.
Yeah.
And it's been such a beneficial experience for me that if I can help even one person travel as a result of writing it, then it's totally worth it as far as I'm concerned. That's why I wrote it, to help others do the same thing. And especially for those that maybe don't have people around who are going to be supportive, and instead just have people standing there going, well, you can't do that. Or, you know, you're going to destroy your career if you do that. Yep. You don't understand that there are other options If that's your support network, then it's going to be very difficult to make the decision to travel. So I at least wanted to try and provide another form of support for people.
Yes.
So Travel for Your Life is available on Amazon in paperback and Kindle. And I also have a website related to the book, also called travelforyourlife.com, which has tips on how to travel. But also, as I mentioned before, that does plot out routes around countries if you would like to not spend your life planning what you're going to do in different locations.
Absolutely. So helpful tips. And it also has fabulous gear suggestions and things like that, which can be very helpful.
It does.
Wow.
Yep. I spent a long time picking my backpack. Thought I should just know which one to go with.
Exactly. And understanding why and what makes it awesome for you so that they can understand maybe what would make it awesome for them. So,
yes,
there is definitely what the best thing about travel in general, and certainly about solo travel, there's no such thing as one size fits all.
No, it's a really personal thing. And that's why, if people have information, then they can work out how they want to do it themselves.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Well, I am so excited that you were able to spend some time with us today, Chantell. And I know we have, I think, an 11 or 13-hour time difference. So I definitely appreciate you waking up bright and early to enjoy your day and mine. And if you have one inspiration to somebody who's on the brink of becoming a solo traveler and they just haven't pulled the trigger on it yet, what would your thought or comment be to them?
To make the decision that they're going to go now. Make the decision right now that they will travel. And then everything else is not a block to traveling. It's just something you've got to work out the solution to. But that's the first step, is making the firm decision and then working towards actually achieving that. And bit by bit, every step you take, you'll get a little bit closer and eventually you'll get there. It may take a bit of time. Unless you start working towards it, it's never just going to magically happen.
Absolutely. And again, you put together that plan. It wasn't like you just said, I'm going to go travel the world and off you went. You you created a plan, you worked the plan, and then this is the result. And there's no end date to the new lifestyle that you've created.
There isn't currently, no.
I love it. Thank you so much again for spending time with me today.
Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure.
Wasn't it great to hear the stories that Chantell shared with us today? I love that she'll just pick up a spot at a table and strike up a conversation with a stranger. That's how you do it. If you love these stories and want to help support Go Solo Live, you can do so by making a small financial contribution to the show at www.patreon.com/Go Solo Live. We've reached the end of today's episode, but the conversation doesn't have to end there. Go to Facebook, Transform Via Travel, and like the page and follow what we're doing, and certainly check in with us on Twitter at Go Solo Live. Remember to invite your friends to listen to the podcast and contact me at Jennifer@transformviatravel.com if you're interested in being a guest on a future episode. And until next time, remember, go solo, not alone.